Welcome to Something to Wrestle With.
Welcome to Wrestle With.
Bruce Prichard. Well, you know.
Let's talk about something I've always wanted to know here. You guys allowed him on January 4th to go to Japan and work the Hustle pay-per-view. What's up with that?
God, I have absolutely no idea. That's a JR and Johnny Ace situation.
Well, I'll ask JR on his new podcast. January 12th, he comes back to Raw on Uniondale, New York, in that edition of Raw. And Matt Hardy's out and demands more respect. Steve Austin comes out and threatens to beat him up. And Hardy said he wants to face someone he's never wrestled before. And here comes Goldberg. He pins Matt Hardy in about 2.5 minutes after a spear and a jackhammer. And then Goldberg declares himself eligible for the Royal Rumble. Scott Steiner runs into Goldberg backstage and tells him he's winning the Royal Rumble and challenges him to a match the next week in Green Bay, Wisconsin. There we would see Goldberg beat both Test and Scott Steiner in a 3-way when Goldberg hit Test with a spear and a jackhammer at 6 minutes and 56 seconds. Did you guys see maybe something you could do with Goldberg and Scott Steiner right away? Who was a proponent of that?
I don't think anybody was a proponent of that. It was just a one-off, and maybe make a little interest off of the old WCW. Maybe there's a little bit of a rivalry there, but it was nothing more than that.
Royal Rumble 04, Philadelphia. Terry is interviewing Goldberg backstage and she asks him how it feels to be number 30. Before he gets a chance to respond, Brock Lesnar interrupts and Goldberg doesn't even get to say a word. And Brock says, no one cares what number he is. So at this point, you guys have already sort of set in stone. We're definitely doing Brock and Goldberg at WrestleMania. Did you know at this point that Brock was done as well?
I don't think we knew Brock was done as well. I think Brock in February came to us with his, I want to go play football. So at this point, we were still looking at doing Brock and Goldberg at WrestleMania and Goldberg getting Brock over.
Goldberg says he's going to win the Rumble and then regain his title and adds, ain't that right, Hardcore? Looking over Brock's shoulder, and Brock jumps and turns to see if Hardcore Holly's behind him. He's not. It was a trick. And it was a nice subtle way to give Holly his heat back after the clean loss earlier, showing that even though Brock won, he still fears him. So Goldberg said, some people have the nerve to call Mick Foley a coward. I don't think so. I mean, it feels like at this point, if you guys needed some creative, Holly would have had an idea, right?
Damn right. I got an idea. How about I beat you both?
Goldberg comes in at number 30. He eliminates Nunzio, Charlie Haas, John Cena, and Billy Gunn. Lesnar comes in, gives him an F5. And when Goldberg's yelling at him, Angle comes in from behind and throws him out. So this is, destined to be here. The fans were even yelling, Goldberg at Brock back when his debut happened in 2002. Did you guys sort of have that as a dream WrestleMania match all along? Like when you first brought him in, did you have a Brock Goldberg WrestleMania moment sort of in the back of your mind when he first comes in?
Absolutely. You had, the obvious ones. You had Goldberg Austin, you had Goldberg Rock, and then you had Goldberg versus Brock, and the two big bulls finally colliding. And that was something that we wanted to get to. So WrestleMania was the place for it.
The next night on Raw, Kane and Goldberg ends in a no contest when the lights go out and the smoke fills the ring. It's really just a tease for the Kane Undertaker match though, for 20. Later in the show, Austin gives Goldberg a ticket to No Way Out, and Austin tells him that a buddy of his gave him a front row ticket, but he can't go because he's booked up. And Austin says he's not going to represent Raw. He's going to represent the good name of Stone Cold Steve Austin, and says, don't do anything I wouldn't do. So that pretty much guarantees that Goldberg's going to interfere in the Brock Lesnar Eddie Guerrero match at No Way Out. At this time, Goldberg starts to grow a beard out. Is that something that anyone in the company says anything about? It's a little thing, but once upon a time you had to have permission to grow facial hair or cut your hair or whatever. Was that the case here for Goldberg, or does he do what he wants?
No, he just did it, and he's a manly man that grows beard fast. But I'm pretty sure he cut it off shortly thereafter. And the reason being is you got marketing stuff out there. You got action figures and just other promotional material. And if you look different, nowadays you look different. They just make new shit, and you get more action figures out there.
Right.
So,
we're going to talk about that Eddie Guerrero Brock Lesnar match on another show, guys. Don't worry. Before we talk about it here briefly, I do want to ask about how far along you guys got in even discussing a new contract. Keller reported there's some discussion of re-signing Goldberg to a new contract, or at least offering him one. However, if the company does offer Goldberg a new deal, it will not even approach the money he's currently making. The company figures that Goldberg isn't going to accept less money for the same number of dates. So if they do make an offer, it'll probably be a special appearance contract that would require him to work a special number of pay-per-views and make occasional television appearances to build up those matches. The 1-year contract expires at WrestleMania 20. Here in January of 2004, what was the temperature of the company with the idea of entertaining a new contract for him?
From a creative standpoint, we weren't entertaining it, and we weren't thinking about it. However, if they could work something out with him and talent relations and Vince were happy with it, we would make something work. But we weren't putting a lot of thought into it on the creative side of things, because we felt we had pretty much hit a wall with Goldberg and what we were going to get out of it. And after WrestleMania, just figured, shit, what do you do? So, it just didn't look good, and it didn't feel good. So until we heard the definitive, yes, we got him for another year or 2 years, we moved on, and we weren't really concentrating on Goldberg at that point, other than getting to WrestleMania.
On the February 9th edition of Raw in Portland, Goldberg comes to the ring and Vince McMahon interrupts, and then Steve Austin rides out on his ATV, and Vince invites Paul Heyman out. Heyman tells Goldberg he better stay in his seat at the pay-per-view during the Lesnar match, and Goldberg says that Lesnar's next. And then Heyman gets a spear for his troubles. He attempts to give McMahon a spear, but McMahon moves and he spears Austin by mistake. This is the setup to get Austin as the referee for Lesnar. Why did you guys think that the Brock Lesnar, Bill Goldberg needed Steve Austin as a special guest referee?
Just for, star power and allure, and to make that match more of an attraction, because frankly, we didn't think it was going to be a masterpiece from bell to bell. And the thought process was, let's get Steve in there, let's color it up. And it gave Steve something to do of a marquee match and a marquee spot on WrestleMania.
Let's talk about No Way Out. San Francisco, February 15th. Can't wait to cover this. We are covering it on February of 2019. So set your calendars, folks. 11 months from now, we're doing it. The main event here, of course, is Brock Lesnar defending the world title against Eddie Guerrero. And during the match, the ref goes down after a Brock F5 attempt, and Brock gets the title belt. Goldberg runs out and gives Brock a spear and then leaves. 2 minutes later, Brock comes back with an F5 attempt, and Eddie escapes and DDTs Brock and hits a frog splash for the pin and wins the WWE title. It's one of the most memorable moments in WWE history. And I think a lot of people sort of forget the fact that Goldberg was involved in that. Biggest night of Eddie's career at that point, right?
Absolutely. I cried like a little baby. We had Eddie's entire family was there. He had brought his mom in, and it was an extremely emotional night. I remember though, going back, and we'll talk about it at a later date, but the finish of that match, hating Goldberg being involved in it, but also understanding that you had to have Goldberg involved in it to get to WrestleMania. So it's the lesser of two evils, and you had to do it to get where we needed to go.
The next night, Vince makes it official. Austin is the ref for Goldberg and Lesnar, and then Lesnar attacks Austin from behind and gives him an F5. So now Austin is essentially square. He's got heat with both guys now. Is Austin nervous about taking any of these moves, whether the fear or the F5 with his neck injury?
the F5 would be easy for him to take because he can take that on his stomach and he's not really snapping his neck back. I don't know if there was any concern on the spear, but that would be kind of iffy. And as best I remember, Bill took really good care of Steve going down on that spear. So he was taken care of from a creative standpoint on our side. I know we were concerned about Steve taking the spear because of the neck issue and just not aggravating that anymore.
Goldberg wasn't on the March 1st or the March 8th Raw. I don't think he's back on Raw for like 12 years. What's the thinking here and not having Goldberg appear on either Raw as you're in your WrestleMania March? Like it's WrestleMania season. Is he not there because he's already maxed out his dates? Has communication broke down? Why wasn't Goldberg there on March 1st or March 8th?
No, it wasn't any of that. It was because you got two guys that are going to be leaving in Brock and Goldberg, and to devote any more television time than promoting the match. We had done all we could do to build up that match. We had Steve there to do it and other people to talk about it and what have you. But the feeling was, do we really need to devote any more television time to this? And we can promote it and talk about it, but not have to have either one of them there. The next time you're going to see him is in the ring at Mania.
Let's get to WrestleMania 20. Goldberg's taking on Brock Lesnar here. Of course, we know Steve Austin is the special guest referee. A pretty memorable match, but maybe not for all the right reasons. Bruce, a lot of people think this is the worst match in WrestleMania history. What's your take on that?
It's not the worst match in WrestleMania history, for fuck's sake. Didn't we have a Hell in a Cell?
A candle in a cell?
Yeah, Jesus Christ. There have been worse matches, but this stunk. Everybody knew it. I watched it in the audience, and the air just came out of the garden. It was just horrible. And both guys were going through the motions as far as Brock and Goldberg. The crowd had turned on both. They didn't give a shit. And they knew both guys were leaving, and they were pissed off at both guys. You know what I mean? They were pissed off that Goldberg wasn't staying around, and they were pissed off that Brock wasn't staying around, and they just wanted Steve to kick both of their asses. So the only high spot in that whole match was the stunners at the end.
Sort of a weird deal here because the crowd's booing them all. There's Goldberg sucks chants. Really hard to get anything to go right for the crowd. After the match is over, I guess I should mention, Goldberg gets the win after a spin and a jackhammer. Did anybody give a shit what the finish was? Why was the decision made to have Goldberg win?
The decision made to have Goldberg win was babyface finish. There's no reason to have Brock go over at this point. Babyface finish, get him out of there, and then Steve stun him.
Brock give a shit?
No.
After the match is over, Lesnar gives the crowd and Austin 2 middle fingers, and Austin stuns him. And then Austin tosses Goldberg a beer, and Goldberg doesn't even try to grab it. So the crowd boos. Austin throws him another beer and he catches it. They drink beer together for a minute, and then Austin gives him a stunner. And Austin is the guy who's sort of the star of the match, right? What's Vince's reaction backstage as this is happening?
Well, I watched it in the crowd, and I did go backstage afterwards. Vince's reaction was a non-reaction. He sat there, and the next match going in, and thank you guys. Next. Didn't sit there and have a conversation with them. It was over, and he was moving on to the next match, and he got the match in the ring, and he got the match the fuck out of the ring.
Who was the agent for that match? Do you remember?
I do not. I think it was, I don't even want to guess because I don't know.
Everybody knew going in, this is their last for both. How are the boys receiving it? I mean, what's the talk in the locker room, the office? Give me the temperature.
Well, the feeling was, it wasn't one guy leaving and one guy staying and wondering if somebody was going to do business. There wasn't that feeling at all. It just was more than anything, a feeling of move on and let's have it be the least painful that it can possibly be. I think that people thought that they would have a better match than they did, but I think that the crowd, when the crowd turned on both guys the way they did, that they kind of got lost out there. And Steve, try as he may, there wasn't a whole lot to do to save the damn thing. So for us, it was like, okay, it's a necessary evil. You got to have the match. You got to get through it, and just wanted it to be over. I was sad for Brock because I didn't want Brock to leave. I was sad that at that time it was his last match. I knew he would be coming back at some point. You just kind of knew it. But for me, it was sad because Brock from day one, you know, he was a stud, and I just would have rather him go out on a higher note at that time. But it wasn't meant to be.
Let's talk about the finish, because it made the dirt sheets that Brock was originally scheduled to win the match, but when he decided to leave, it was switched to Goldberg going over. And I know what you said made sense about babyface, but the dirt sheets, of course, say the reason was they're angrier with Brock. Any truth to that?
Weren't happy with Brock, but it was the decision ultimately came down to just get the babyface over and get him out of there.